Sid Mallya has had a unique life, to say the least. As the son of Vijay Mallya, one of India's most prominent businessmen, who has made headlines with every move he takes. Living in the constant glare of media attention couldn't have been easy for you, Sid. And constantly being judged, criticized, envied, even reviled sometimes for the choices that you made. You were constantly in the headlines, constantly being photographed. Must have been really, really difficult. And so it doesn't really come as a surprise that you constantly felt like you had a dementor, like you say it in your book, a dementor
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
on your shoulder, sucking the life and happiness out of you. But it's not for me to talk. This is your time, and I want you to talk about your book, which is, of course, about your mental health. Mental health is a major concern worldwide. And I'm sure that this book, which describes your own journey, is actually going to help create a lot of awareness and sensitivity around this issue. Because constantly I hear you say in the book that it's okay, there's nothing wrong with this. It's an illness. You take an aspirin if you had a headache. So, why
Mm.
not get professional help for something that plagues you? But first of all, did you ever think that you would write a book? And
Uh,
especially one that is so brutally honest?
um, I think the book for me, it was after I started doing all this work around mental health, right? And I did the Consider This series last year. And after I saw the response that got, I thought that maybe the book seemed to be kind of the next progression in the line. I think when I saw that how many people I was able to help just by being open and honest in that series, I was like, okay, well, I need to now continue doing whatever I can to shine a light on mental health. And the book was the next thing to come out of it. And I always knew if I was going to do this book, it was going to be, no holds barred. It was going to be open. It was going to be honest. It was going to be raw, because otherwise, kind of, I didn't feel like what was really the point in it. And funnily, I'll tell you, is that originally it was under the working title of Consider This, like the series.
Mm,
And
mm.
then I kept writing in the book, and you'll see it throughout. And actually, the editors had to take it out a few of these, but I'd constantly said, if I'm honest, if I'm honest, if I'm honest. And then it clicked in my head, and I said, well, that's what this is. It's honest. Why don't we call it If I'm Honest?
Yeah, because it really is. And that's the first thing that strikes you, that, it's like brutally honest, because you're really, I think it's fearless and it's brave. It's very few people who would actually just completely take off their, carefully crafted masks and show themselves and their weaknesses. And I think you've done that. But that also means that you sort of really connect with the audience, connect with your readers, because at a level, people do feel this, that this is somebody like me talking about the issues
Y-
that I may be going through.
Yes, and that was very important to me. I think some of the feedback that I got from the Consider This series was that, and obviously it was a different medium because that's a video,
Right.
but
Yeah.
a lot of people said that we feel like you're directly talking to us. And I wanted to ensure that same thing came across in the book. And one thing I say in the book, and one thing I said in the Consider This series, I said, this is not to be preachy, right? Not at all. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a self-help guru who's going to sit there and try and tell you this is what you must do.
Right.
The best way to connect to people is to just say, hey, look, this is my truth. I'm honest. If you relate to this, then great. If you don't, that's also fine. And that was my main aim in it, was to just show people that they're not alone. It's like, I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to offer you solutions. I'll offer you some of the things that worked for me. Maybe they'll work for you. But really what I'm trying to show you is that A, it's okay to talk about these things, and B, don't worry. There's a lot more people who've probably gone through things than you think, and you're not on your own.
So, do you want to read something to us? Because I think I'd like the people who are here listening to us today to actually hear your voice, read out what you've written.
Of course. I mean, what do you think? What should I read?
Um,
Maybe I can read something from the from the introduction of why I wanted
Right.
to write it, or maybe something about my own story. I don't know, whatever you think.
Yeah, maybe something that you think is really important, the kind of message that you're trying to send out to people from here, and also because when you speak, when you write, you're actually speaking. That's the
Right.
feeling I get. Yeah.
And that's actually how I wrote the book. I'll just quickly tell you is that I started by sitting down and typing, and I got about 10,000 words into it, and I was like, this just isn't working for me. So I started interviewing myself and talking it. I recorded the whole thing, voice note. I'd write bullet points down of what I wanted to write, and then I just talk, transcribed the voice notes, and then obviously edited it and changed it into how a book should be. But that was actually my process, was speaking, because I felt like that's a better way to connect.
Mm-hmm. So that comes through.
That does, right. So maybe I'll say, I think there's 3 big points that I want to get across in this book, and maybe I'll read those 3 now. There's 5, but there's 3. One is, no one is immune from suffering issues of mental health. Mental health doesn't discriminate. No one is immune to it. It can affect everyone at all stages of life, regardless of wealth, gender, ethnicity, upbringing, or success. There can sometimes be a belief that only certain people have mental health issues, and if you come from a life of perceived privilege, there is no way you could suffer. Even more dangerous than this is the belief that there is no way you have the right to suffer. This is certainly a belief that I've had aimed at me at certain times from those who could never understand how someone like me, whatever the hell that means, could suffer from anything, let alone a mental health condition. And I know I'm not alone here. How many of you reading this right now have had this said to you? What do you have to be depressed about? Your life is great. The truth is that no matter how great your life might appear to be, and by what yardstick do we measure great anyway, no one is immune from mental health related issues, regardless of age, gender, upbringing, financial status, the school they went to, the clothes they wear, or anything. Things might look different on the outside, but on the inside, we're all the same. And before I go on, I think I wanted to emphasize that point in the book, Preeti, because a lot of people judge others from what they see on the outside, and to use the old cliche, but this is probably where it's the most appropriate, is don't judge a book by its cover, which is so true. Which it comes to people is that I think we are very quick as a society to make judgments on people just based on what we see. Oh well, this person comes from has a good job, they're fine. This person has this, they're fine. This person has that, they're fine. Without realizing that what's going on the inside a lot of the time doesn't, what goes on the outside doesn't tell the full story of what's going on within. And at the end of it, if you strip away gender, class, finance, religion, age, we're all the same. And we're all susceptible to suffer from things like this. So that was the point I wanted to get across there. The next point is what you mentioned, which is it's okay to seek help. So growing up, I was a super stubborn human being. For the sake of argument, let's just say it's because I'm a Taurus, okay? The idea of asking for help for anything would have been a joke to me. Like many young people, I thought I knew and could do everything myself, and I shared in the belief that vulnerability is weakness. Well, here I am today at my good old age of 34, and I hold my hands up and say, I didn't know everything, and I still don't. I don't have all the answers, and I certainly don't always have the strength to deal with things alone. And since accepting that it's okay to not know things, to be vulnerable, to feel scared, to seek help, I've been able to let my guard down and get the help I need. Seeking help when I went through depression not only helped me deal with what I was experiencing, but also opened up a whole world of discovery that has since helped me deal with all the other issues I faced throughout my life. Many people find it hard to seek help, even though in the back of their minds they know it's the right thing to do. This is partly because of the stigma that sadly still remains around mental health. This stigma often makes it seem unacceptable for someone to suffer a mental health related issue, and worse, to seek help. For some reason, if someone admits to having a problem or gets help, they can quickly be labeled crazy or unstable. But why should this be the case? We don't start labeling others if they break a bone or come down with the flu. So why should those who suffer mental ailments be classified differently? If you had a toothache, you would go to a dentist. If you had fever, you would go to the doctor. So why shouldn't you go to the appropriate specialist for help if you are suffering from something mental? By sharing my experience of seeking help, I hope I can show that not only is it okay to get help, but it is also very much encouraged. Because what I've learned is that by allowing yourself to lower your guard and be vulnerable is actually the greatest show of strength there is. Had I not done that, I certainly wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today to not only deal with my issues, but talk about them as well. There also certainly wouldn't be a book about it. And I think I wanted to really include that point is because, I think that there is still sadly a stigma, right, surrounding mental health. Worldwide, it's probably more prevalent in India, that stigma.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what we all have to do, we all have a duty here, right, to end that stigma. And the way to do that is to just, talk more about it, to further the conversation and to tell people that it's okay, it's acceptable, it's in fact, in today's day and age, the other thing that I think we've got to also realize, and just before I read the last little thing, is just to keep interjecting, is that the world we live in today, when you were growing up, even when I was growing up, things like this that we're doing right now didn't exist. These video calls where I can sit 10,000 miles away from you doing an interview, right? The Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world didn't exist. Therefore, the mental pressures that we all had to deal with were very different to what the youth of today have to deal with. I mean,
and you're the youth of today as well. I mean, you're
and I'm technically, and I am, and that's the funny thing is that I'm only 34,
exactly, yeah.
But I'm technically not the youth of today. At the speed of which technology evolves, I'm not actually the youth anymore, which is the irony. And it's like, back in my day, when I was in school, if someone wanted to say something to you, they had to come and say it to your face. That was the only means of communication. And there was no issue, there's no help given to mental health related issues or anything. Whereas today, if you're an 11-year-old child, bullying, which is, bullying has been around. Bullying is not something that's new. Bullying has been there for years. But as I said, like if you needed to bully someone, it had to be face to face. Today, you can online. People can get their opinion across. People can bring you down just through the click of a button from sitting on the other side of the world. I mean, we have 12-year-old children worrying about how to edit photographs before posting them because they're worried about getting likes. The stimulus which the youth today have just didn't exist anymore. And as a result of that, awareness of mental health needs to also increase because the opportunities to suffer from mental ill health have also gone up.
Right. But just to step back a little, you had this wonderful life, this life of privilege, as you've just said, and you had all the material comforts that anybody could possibly wish for. You were leading this sort of charmed life. And as you said, what is inside doesn't always show on the outside. So then what happened to bring on the depression? I mean, you said you you did realize you had OCD, but what about the depression? Because that something obviously was triggering all these things.
Well, I think that, as I say in the book, I probably suffered from the depression a lot earlier than I was initially aware. One thing that I've learned is that depression is something that you can suffer from without really knowing it. And I think awareness is key to anything in life, right? Because without awareness, if you're not aware of something, it's as good as it really not existing, or at least you thinking it doesn't exist. So it all coincided with me going to drama school, where I became a lot more aware of my emotions, my feelings, my inner body activity. I was reconnected to emotions and feelings that I perhaps had shut off from, because of upbringing and things like that, boarding school. So it's probably not necessarily that the depression started then. It's probably that I just became aware of it then.
Yeah, and you also talk about the excessive drinking and the partying and all of it also being a sort of a symptom for what you were going through. And then at one point you just decide to stop. And apparently that got, so when you revealed that, you got a lot of hits, attention, because of what you said, and people sort of reached out to ask you how that happened. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. I should also clarify on this point that I think that it's I might have made it seem in this book that I was like this big drinker who was drinking every night of the week. Like that wasn't the case. Like, there are people even today who are like, that's surprising because we didn't think you drank that much. And what I say in the book is that it's not actually how much you drink, it's how you drink. And for me, it was whether I was having one drink or whether I was having 10 drinks, that level of anxiety the next morning was there. So it was like, well, then what's the point in this? And after I shared that Instagram post on the 1 year anniversary of when I stopped, it's been 3 years now, there was just a huge response from people being like, oh my gosh, we feel the same way. We get anxiety too. We've been thinking about stopping, but never felt like we could because, it's a social thing. What if we get ostracized by our friends? But hearing you say that you could stop fills us with a lot of confidence, and maybe we can stop too. At that point, that's when it really all started for me. I was like, oh, hang on a second. Like, if I was able to just touch a chord with so many people by putting up a 50-word Instagram post, maybe I could continue to help people by talking about some of the other things I've gone through. And then that's how the Consider This series was born. And then that's how this book was born as well. What it taught me is that honesty is literally the best policy. Like, honesty that's all people want, is truth in realness, right? We live in such a world today where, whether it's, look at the COVID, right? Look at coronavirus. So many conflicting stories. How did it start? Where does it come from? What's the truth on vaccination? What's the truth on wearing masks? What's the truth at staying at home? Then look at politics in the last 5-6 years. Was this election stolen? Was that election stolen? Is this politician lying? Is that politician lying? And we live in a world where there's so much uncertainty that I think people just want to be told things factually and straight, like, hey, look, this is the truth. And I think people really resonate with that and appreciate that.
Yeah. The other thing that comes across in the book, and which, obviously, is your father. He's this larger than life personality. He's somebody that has, as I said earlier, dominated headlines for various reasons. And so what was that like, and what effect did that have on you, the father, while you were growing up? Because he was there and he was not there. And then he was this huge, in the press, in your face all the time.
Yeah, I don't think I really noticed too much of it, right? Because I grew up in the UK and I was with my mum. I went to boarding school when I was young. So I was kind of, if you like, sheltered from that life. And I'd only see it in drips and drabs during holidays and stuff. I didn't really think much of it. Like, back in the day when I was younger, I saw a businessman, really, a guy who was really passionate about his brand and selling his brand. And I don't think him being in the public eye affected me growing up, because really, apart from sort of when I'd come to India during the holidays, there would be like, things were a little bit different, let's just say, than from where I lived in the UK. But I don't think it really played on my mind until I got a bit older.
And then, of course, you've talked about the divorce and how that affected you as well. And then your half siblings and the other family, and how you enjoyed being part of the family. You sort of, this group that you became a part of for short periods in your life, and then you had to go back home to the UK. So tell us a bit about that. How did the divorce really affect you? Because that, again, is something that does traumatize children.
For sure.
And you say here that very few people actually acknowledge that.
And I think the thing with it is that I don't think I realized quite how much it affected me till I got a bit older as well. I think that's most of the time, right? We don't really realize at the time how something is affecting you until you get more in tune with yourself. And then it's all a process of self-work. Maybe, if I'd never done the self-work, and if there's others out there who never do the self-work, they'd never see the trauma that was caused by things. But I did. And I just remember, and now looking back on it, I remember feelings that I felt at the time And from this perspective, being like, oh my gosh, it really did affect me. But of course, when you're 9 or 10 years old, you don't have that kind of mindset where you're like, I wonder what the long-term repercussions of this is going to be. You don't think like that, right? Whereas hindsight's a great tool. But it was great. I mean, it was hard because there were these periods of euphoria. Like, I know the school holidays are coming up. I'm going to see this other family. I'm going to see these siblings. And then just when those trips would come to an end, it was like just the absolute opposite. This downer, this like crushing, like I'm being taken away sort of feeling. And of course I wasn't, but you know, at that age, you don't really have many ways to process it in your mind.
So did you ever when you look back now, there is this feeling of a certain lack of stability, or this kind of, you wanted the comfort of being surrounded by a family, of having constants in your life. Do you think that was something?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I definitely look at friends of mine who've had like solid family backgrounds and this and that, and I always used to remember growing up being like, oh, I wonder what that would have been like. So it is something that I look for. I guess I got a lot of that. That's why I love boarding school so much, because it kind of gave me that stability.
And you talk about the theater later, that was another place where you felt it was like your family, and that actually helped you a lot.
Yeah. When acting as well, like I just love being around people and like connecting with people. And like, I think it's like, it's kind of like when you have a group of people who come together for one shared common goal, is that sense of closeness and commitment and camaraderie, which is nice.
Another time of stress, I think, which has been, which is, I guess, even now, is your father's trial, which also you mention somewhere towards the end of the book, and the stress and the hurt that it caused you. And then you also mentioned that documentary, the Netflix documentary, which made you sad and angry to see, the way that he had been portrayed, because of course everything always comes across as one-sided and there is judgment. That continuing sense of stress, for example.
Yeah, well, I think also you have to also, if we just step back for a second and look at it, it's also a very surreal experience, right? Now, you put on Netflix, you put on Amazon, right? Because you want to go and watch your new show, right? You're tired at night, you want to watch something new, you put on a Netflix original, or you go and browse on Amazon and you're like, I don't know what I want to watch, 4 more shots, but one of those shows, and it's like, it will recommend something to you. And then you're sitting there, and the thing you're being recommended to watch is about your own father. It's quite a strange thing, like to be sitting there scrolling and being like, this is the #1 ranked show right now, and it's called, it's not a very flattering title, right? Bad Boy Billionaires. And then you're like, oh, I know that guy. And then you watch the trailer, and then I'm like, I even know that guy because it's me in it. And so from that point of view, it's, there's that surrealness that I think that people forget sometimes, where it's like, we all, like, people will send me messages being like, don't you feel disgusted? Don't you feel, there'll be some article or something. Don't you feel ashamed? Don't you feel disgusted? Da, 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 da. And what I have to try and remind people is that, let's just put everything, what he's accused of, all that stuff to the side for a second. But when I'm reading stuff, I'm not reading it like you as an outsider reading it about a third party. I'm actually reading it about a parent, and that is it's a very strange. It's not really something that can be explained. Where it's like, this is just weird on many levels, and you have to kind of get past that first. And that I think is quite hard to deal with, which is like, whether it's the Amazon, whether it's the Netflix, because this case has been so public, it's like it belongs to everyone, and everyone's entitled to an opinion, and everyone is entitled to an opinion. I think opinions are great. I think everyone should have opinions, but that comes with a big but. I think then we should all be open to discussion, right? If I have an opinion on something and you have a differing opinion on it, well, then I should be open to listen to your opinion. You should be open to listen to mine, and we should have a discussion about it, and maybe we'll learn something from each other. Whereas today, because people can get an opinion across, like I mentioned earlier, by the click of a button,
Right.
the diligence required to form an opinion in the first place gets lost. And now it's like, it's no longer an opinion, it's just a vindictive attack. And I think that can get quite frustrating at times, which is, you know what, I'm happy if you don't like someone, if you think he did this, he did that, cool, but let's have a discussion about it.
Yeah, there's no space for that anyway. I mean, there's nothing that you can, respond and say something. So yeah, but for you, I mean, personally, what helped you to realize that, you were somewhere at the edge of a precipice almost, and that you needed professional help now? When did you realize that, and what were the tools that helped you? You do talk in the book also about a workbook.
So yeah. I let me see if I have this here.
But you talk at, that staring into that mirror, and that's the point at which you realized you really needed to get help.
That was the point. Is that's what I thought I'd quickly read that little bit if you want. It's just a small little. So when I came back to London after the wedding, everything that had been building up finally came out. It was a stereotypical British day, wet and cold, and the sky was as grey as an elephant's ass. I lived in a duplex that had a staircase, and I just sat there and broke down. I cried and cried and cried. The floodgates had literally opened. Years of emotion came out. Opposite the staircase was a mirror. When I looked up and saw my reflection, I shouted the same negative monologue that I now had become something of an expert at delivering. Why are you feeling this way? You shouldn't be feeling like this. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Of course, my reflection wasn't giving me any answers, which wound me up even more. Really, the best way to describe how I was feeling was to use a reference from Harry Potter, because I'm a big HP fan. In the Harry Potter books, characters called Dementors guard the Azkaban prison, and these Dementors suck the happiness out of everyone they come in contact with. As I sat there on the staircase crying, I felt like I had a Dementor on my shoulder, sucking the life and happiness out of me. It was at that point that I realized I needed to do something about this, that it was no way to live. So I decided to seek professional help. So really it was a buildup of stuff. And then that was eventually, when you sit there and you're just kind of like, hang on, I'm 30 years old or however old I was. And I was like, look how I'm feeling right now. Clearly something is out of whack here and I need to go and get this checked out.
So what were the tools that you used, or what really helped you? I mean, there was therapy and there was meditation.
Therapy was I'd say therapy was the biggest. And I'd also say to anyone watching this right now, therapy is great, but it's all about finding the right therapist. At the end of the day, a therapist is only going to be able to give you as much as you're willing to give them, right? As much as you're willing to open up. And you're more likely only to open up to people who you feel comfortable with. So it's a kind of a dance like that. So, if you find someone that you don't feel comfortable to open up with, well, then it's going to be limited what the therapist can do for you. So I think it's important to, and I'd say this to anyone, if you do seek therapy, and I understand that therapy is not an option for everyone, just accessibility isn't always there, but do try a couple out first and find one that you really do connect with. And for those who don't have access to therapy, there are so many other tools out there that we can help ourselves. I talk about this in the book, like there are workbooks you can do, there's resources online. Obviously, be a little bit careful when searching things on the internet. There's a lot of great resources, there's also a lot of trash. So just discern what you're finding. And other things, meditation, exercise, going for walks, running. For me, I realized running was something that made me feel very good. Running up until that point was only a means of getting fit, and then it became another form of meditation for me. So there are always thousands of things one can do, but it's not kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a one size fits all approach. It's sort of more, you've got to find what works for you. Like I have friends of mine who love to cook, and they find cooking very therapeutic. And for them, actually, the whole process of chopping the tomatoes and putting it in the pan and creating the meal and then eating it, the whole experience is a very calming thing. playing with a pet. So there's so many different things we can do. It's just you've got to find what works for you.
And then, the films and the acting and what that brought to you. So the decision also to do your own thing, to in a way cut away from the family business and be your own person. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I was at a level where I was at a point where I just really wasn't happy with what I was doing. And I felt like I was at an age where I kind of was at that crossroads, which was like, all right, if I'm going to do this, let's do this now. And performing, acting, maybe it's the only child in me, like always wanted to like play and have fun and like interact with people and connect to people. And that's why I decided that that's the route that I wanted to go down. That was, I think, probably the best decision I ever made in my life. Not from, even if I don't have a successful acting career, let's just say, even if which I don't think will be the case, but even if that happened, the last 9 years helped me become, or at least find, the authentic version of me. And this book probably wouldn't exist, if I didn't go down that route and change career and find something that was really more in line with what I am as a person.
Yeah, but you didn't want to stay on in India and do Bollywood.
No, I did. I mean, I said it in the book as well. I think that there was a couple of things. One, I don't think I would have been very good at it. I think it's Bollywood is a specialty, and the people who do it are fantastic. They dance, they sing, they act, they do all of those things, which wasn't really something that I would have been, I don't think, too good at. Now, of course, it's a different world, right? With all the OTT stuff, with Amazon and all these platforms, this great stuff they do. And secondly, I think there was probably a little bit of fear, which was, I was trying to get away from the judgment of being someone's son. And if I got into Bollywood, I'm sure there would have been opportunities, but then it would have been like, oh, so-and-so's son is doing this. And I think I was just, that drove me to want to be like, nah, I need to go away from here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things, because you've never shied. I mean, in the book, whatever I read is you really don't shy away from saying things like that. I mean, you are actually facing yourself in the mirror and telling us exactly what you see, which I find really rather endearing and charming. So it's really a plus. So we come to the last chapter, where I think I can definitely see sort of a growth. It's a definite progression. Even in your writing, because here now you sound more mature, confident, full of strength, because you're presenting to us all the learnings, that this self-work has brought to you, and which you are presenting to us as well. You've learned to deal with the challenges that life throws up, and you've done a large amount of what you call self-work. Tell me what that is.
So, it's funny because I'd ended this. I delivered I think right at the end, there's the last thing, which is basically, I won't read it, but it's, so I say, I'll end this chapter by saying what I started with. Only you know what works for you. What works for someone else doesn't have to work for you, and this is okay. I originally hadn't got that in there. I finished it, I delivered my manuscript, and then it was just bugging me. It was like, I need to mention something about self-work and really drive the point home that the word self is very important. So that whole chapter was in there, but it was just that last paragraph. I was like, I need to add this in, because one thing I did, and I know a lot of people do this, is that we go and read all these books, all these self-help books, and then we try and follow them all to a T. And then we can't follow them to a T, and then we beat ourselves up, and we're like, maybe we're failing. What are we doing wrong? Why couldn't Eckhart Tolle do it? Why couldn't I do it? And then what I came to the realization is, I said, the reason is because you are not Eckhart Tolle. You are not Michael Singer. They have written those books based on what worked for them at that specific period of time in their life. So unless you're living the exact same life, while a lot of the guiding principles can be applied to your life, a lot of it has to be modified, and you need to be flexible with yourself. So I said to my editor, I was like, no, I need the manuscript back. I just have to add this in and really make that point, which is find what works for you, and don't be afraid to read 100 books, discard 70 of them because they don't resonate with you, and take the best bits from each other book and make a process that works for you. Something that doesn't resonate with you today might resonate with you in 5 years' time. And something which you think today is like, oh my gosh, this is like the key to enlightenment. Tomorrow you might wake up and think, actually, this has no value to me. And I think that's an important thing when it comes to self-work is to be flexible and to take ownership of your own journey.
It sounds terribly hard. So how difficult was it for you?
I think it's difficult, because I feel like in anything in life, right, there's always a period of overcorrecting anything when you want to fix something. It's like when you're sick, when you're ill and you start taking medicine. They say is that you have to get sicker to get better. You're actually at the point of the most sick just before you start getting better. And I think that's kind of like with anything, like with self-work, like, here I was, and I did all of this work, and I went so far this way on the spectrum. And then eventually the rubber band kind of found it, or what the water found its level in the middle, which is the authentic version.
So we don't have too many questions coming in. There have been a couple of comments about, talking about your honesty and, how wonderful it is to hear you. Where we have one right now from Gurshamsher Singh. Being materially privileged is virtue or vice for you? Do you ever, what? Did Lord Buddha ever inspire you?
So I think, I think being materially privileged, obviously was when you're young, and it meant that I got to live a certain life where finances and things like that weren't a problem. So for that, it was definitely a help. But I would say that obviously on the other side of it is that you get judged a lot for that, which I've mentioned in the book. Lord Buddha, this isn't directly Lord Buddha, but I will show you. This is one of my favorite books, not because of the name, but I shouldn't be promoting something else. But Hermann Hesse's Sidhartha, right, which is a classic anyway. It's a classic. Yeah. That is one book that I read, and even though it's not necessarily about the Buddha directly, it's about people who followed him. And one thing I learned from this book, and this actually helped me a lot with that last chapter, so it's a nice little segue, which is basically, if you've read the book, right, he gets to the end of it, Siddhartha gets to the end of it, and he's like, you can spend your whole life seeking and trying to figure out the right way to live, and realize you've missed out on the living all along. And that was the message that I took from this book. And I think that's the message I'd leave for anyone who does self-work, which is like, you can always be seeking the best way to live, how to live the perfect life. And then you're going to miss out on the living in the middle.
So we have another question. Where do you want to go from here, Sidharth? Do you plan to write more? Did you find the act of writing therapeutic?
I would want to write more if I can continue to help people. I think I'm not going to write for the sake of writing. I think that, if this book does well, and if I find that there's a way that I can continue to help people, then 100% open to writing more and doing whatever I can to help. Did I find it therapeutic? It was hard. It's hard to relive all of the things that I talk about in the book. And it was, I think what was therapeutic about it was knowing in the back of my mind that being this honest would have the potential to help other people. And that's kind of what makes you feel good about it.
Yeah. There's another question. In your opinion, do you think anxiety is a symptom, byproduct of depression, or vice versa, or are both independent issues?
Obviously I'm not a mental health expert, so I couldn't give you a sort of clinical answer to that. But I don't think things are mutually exclusive. I think things can be linked to one another. I think, like, for example, anxiety and OCD and depression, like drinking and triggering OCD and drinking and triggering depression. So many different things are all kind of linked to one another, and I think they can all be triggers for one and the other. But again, I think it might be more on an individual basis, as opposed to it being like a blanket answer to everyone.
Yeah, and for me personally, I had no idea there were so many different kinds of OCD, like you mentioned in the book, because, and each of them sound, really scary if you're carrying that around with you, because it seems to be sort of take over your entire personality, dominate you in a way that's, I don't know, it really shook me.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shock for me as well to realize. I mean, actually, it was. I know I say it was a shock and a comfort, right? Because it was a shock to realize there were so many different types, but it was also a comfort to realize that there were so many different types, and what I was suffering for isn't something that was kind of abnormal.
It had a name. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all of these symptoms had a name, and that you could.
Yeah, they had a name, and that was like, oh, actually, this isn't just something that I suffer with. This is actually part of the OCD.
On a lighter note, being a Harry Potter fan myself, which is the spell you would like to cast on your demons and your problems?
Oh, man. What is the spell? There's that one spell. I think it's not really a spell. I think it's a potion, right? Which actually, this is a funny thing that you mentioned this, which is, I'll tell you something right now. So I think it's in the Half-Blood Prince, which is the 6th book, where Harry wins this competition, and he wins this little vial of, I think it's called Felix Felice or something, which is, it's basically a potion which is liquid luck, right? And he drinks it, and anything comes true for you. And Ron Weasley, his friend, is about to play Quidditch, and he pretends to give him the liquid luck, and Ron has this amazing game, and it's amazing. And then at the end of it, it turns out that Harry didn't give him it. It just was a placebo and made him think that he did it. So the irony there is that a lot of the time, you don't need anything to change what you're going through. You just need to change the mindset of how you approach it.
Yeah. Okay, so we've come to the last question. Does being honest work every time? Should I choose to lead life free from all lies?
I think honesty starts with yourself. I think if you can be honest with yourself, that's the most important thing. I think, that's what I've tried to get across in this book, which is, if I'm honest, which is I'm going to be honest to you about me. I think that's where we need to, all of us can start being more honest with ourselves. And really, if you want to make changes, it has to start from within. Like, quoting Michael Jackson, what does he say in Man in the Mirror? I think the quote is, the line is something like, if you want to make the world a better change, take a look at yourself. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. And honesty has to start with ourselves and within, and that can be very uncomfortable. I think we're all very good to pass judgments on other people, but we don't want to really look at the dark shadow sides of ourselves and be like, oh, okay, actually I do this, I do that, I could change that. So I would say that we can definitely all benefit from being more honest with ourselves.
And so to all your readers and all your followers, in a nutshell, your message.
Well, let me first by saying to everyone who's already bought the book and everyone who's supported me during this journey so far through Consider This and everything, just a big thank you. Everything that I do, and even this book, it's not for me, it's for you. It's for everyone who's, as I will say this right now, like in the dedication, the book says this book is dedicated to anyone who has gone through anything ever. You are not alone. And I think that's probably everyone on the planet. Everyone has gone through something. And I just want people to know it's okay to seek help. It's okay to talk about these sorts of things. It's okay to admit to what we're feeling, fears, insecurities, doubts, and you're not alone. There are a lot of other people out there who feel the same way as you do. Don't feel like you're alone. Don't feel like you have to suffer alone. And the more we can remember that, strength in numbers, the more we can do to continue shining a light on mental health and hopefully ending the stigma that still is there.